It was a creed written into the founding documents that declared the destiny of a nation. Yes, we can. It was whispered by slaves and abolitionists as they blazed the trail toward freedom. Yes, we can. Yes, we can.
It was sung
by immigrants as they struck out the distant shores, pioneers who pushed westward against unforgiving wilderness. Yes, we can.
Yes, we can.
It was the call of workers organized, women who reached for the ballots, a president who chose the moon as our new frontier,
and a king who took us to the mountaintop and pointed the way to the promised land.
Yes, we can to justice and equality.
Yes, we can. Yes, we can. Yes.
Via WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network, the Monday Morning Quarterback on the 21st of August, 2017. A reminder, there should be an eclipse out there. We'll have to check and see before we finish this broadcast as to where the eclipse is at this time. But there are several ways you can look at it with glasses that are darkened or a pinhole, a pinhole type device, depending on where you are in the world, as you can access that event. It's once in a lifetime event. But I can recall, I guess I've been around more than one lifetime, that we've had an eclipse before, a full eclipse. We had, of course, partial eclipse out there, and we will now get a full eclipse if we're lucky. Let me just check the BBC here very quickly and see if, in fact, we get a little corporation here. We actually have more of a worldwide platform, and we can see where we are in terms of Monday and the eclipse going on. I was looking at the Seattle paper, and down in Portland, Oregon, I think is the best place on the Pacific, in the Pacific Northwest, to actually see an eclipse. And some people were talking about other localities that could be seen in. Let's check this and see the world situation to where the eclipse is. Well, okay. Dear America, tips of various places where you can see the eclipse. Okay. We'll see. We can get, this is from the BBC, if we can.
Nothing is like a total solar eclipse.
I'm not a mystic at all, but it does have a kind of gripping effect.
My name is Sharon Hawes, and I am married to Billy Hawes for 48 years, and I think we like to call ourselves eclipse aficionados. We have loved chasing solar eclipses around the globe for about 26 years. So these are the photos that we captured in Thailand. We have been to 14, and we have seen and experienced 11 because
we were rained out in Costa Rica, we were snowed out in Mongolia, and clouded out in Ethiopia.
And of course, next is Missouri, USA.
Even though this was the third eclipse, this was the first time we noticed that the sky was actually not black. This
like
is
the photos.
Like the photos. This is probably everyone's image of an eclipse. I had not painted anything actually in years, and this is my first eclipse painting. And basically, I've made a painting now of every eclipse that we've done.
After going all the way around the world for all these trips, this one is kind of literally in your backyard. Number one, it's in the United States.
One couple's story of an eclipse, and we're in the we're updating our browser here, Foxfire. Anyway, we'll get back to the eclipse, chasing the eclipse across the world, and where in the world you will find the eclipse. Just sort of an interest here of ours to see it. And, okay. Maybe we can get the story here. Let's see. Millions of Americans will witness one of the biggest solar eclipse in almost 100 years. There are usually 2 solar eclipses on Earth per year. They only happen when the sun, the Earth, and the moon align in a specific way. So that is what we have to look out for. The total eclipse will, of course, be on today, and a partial eclipse in the U.S. here in 49 countries. The annual solar eclipse in 60 countries will be on the 26th of December 2019, and a hybrid solar eclipse in 2 countries. It will be on the 20th of April 2023. Now this will begin out in the northeast Pacific Ocean, making its landfall at Lincoln Beach, Oregon. That'll be at 10:30 local time. The path will sweep across North America at approximately 90 minutes, crossing Oregon, Idaho, Wyoming, Nebraska, Missouri, Illinois, Kentucky, Tennessee, North and South Carolina, and Georgia. Other states, as well as Canada and many countries in Central and South of the Americas, will experience a significant partial eclipse. So that is basically where we will be. The partial eclipse will also be visible in Western Africa and Western Europe, but in most of the UK, about 4% of it will be there. So this is the eclipse story for whatever we have. And let's move on here, because we're still having a browser refresh problem there. One of the stories that is kind of fascinating, I was telling H about this, Benjamin Netanyahu's son put on his Facebook page that the organization Black Lives Matter is more dangerous than the neo-Nazis. And this was sort of interesting after Charlottesville. This is Yair Netanyahu took to Facebook, and he mimicked the comment that got DJ Trump into hot water, seeing the Nazis are dying out and making way for a new threat, that of the leftist and civil rights movement. To put things in perspective, I'm a Jew, I'm an Israeli. The neo-Nazi scum in Virginia hates me and my country, but they belong to the past, he wrote. Their breed is dying out. However, the thugs of the Antifa and the Black Lives Movement hate my country and the America too, in my view, just as much as are getting strong, just as they are getting getting stronger and stronger and becoming super dominant in American universities and public life. These comments were in contrast to tweets posted by Benjamin Netanyahu on Tuesday, who said he was outraged by expressions of anti-Semitism, neo-Nazism, and racism in Charlottesville rally, adding that everyone should oppose hate. According to the Times of Israel, sources close to the Prime Minister distant himself from his son Yara. Anyway, so that is sort of the story there, and it's kind of interesting, this whole saga surrounding the neo-Nazis and etc. with older Americans like Orrin Hatch, who lost a brother in the campaign against the Nazis, are now coming out in solidarity against these neo-Nazis, white supremacists, etc. This is actually taking off in this country, different situation. In fact, it was interesting in Boston at the so-called rally there, about 25 neo-Nazis, white supremacists, assortment of all kinds of characters over there. In fact, there was one sign shown that by some character out of Cambridge that is running a Republican. The sign said that Black Lives Matter too. What these characters are doing is trying to present themselves in many different fashions. It's as many of the rightists will call themselves civil rights lawyers, and the alt-right so-called free speech, which are just hate speech demonstrations, are called free speech. In other words, a flippable but usually political consultants use to address things. In other words, take someone else's issues, flip it in your direction. But this is the mastery of what is termed fake news. And it was brilliantly done in Nazi Germany on Lupenpresse as fake news put out there by the Nazis. So in other words, the Nazis were the one putting out the fake or false news, and they would proclaim that the newspapers themselves were actually putting out fake news about them. So in other words, the situation is people get very confused as to what is actually going on in the demonstrations. And with Trump. Trump has been evidently laying low. He'll be on national TV tomorrow night, DJ Trump that is, talking about Afghanistan. Now, that has been a military operation for the last 15 years. The big debate there is, do they add a few thousand more troops to the few thousand that they have there now? They obviously are not winning anything, but there's no definition of winning. He has a chief of staff in Kelly. It was in the military over 40 years, and in his campaigns, they never won a campaign. That doesn't mean they didn't win a military victory, but if you look at Afghanistan, you look at Iraq, those nations are still torn apart. There has been no decisive military victory of any type there. If you go into Vietnam, they lost that, ran out with their tails in. If you go back to the conflict in the Koreas, the Democratic People's Republic of Korea is still there. They're still at war with the so-called republic that they call the South. So in other words, nothing has happened. That is the problem. And this equation of to equate the demonstrators in Charlottesville, Virginia, the counter demonstrators against the Nazis, with causing it and the Nazis, that's a typical right-wing trick. It's like an individual told me, he said, well, we both predicted that DJ Trump would win the election. Well, I don't recall him doing that. But the back and forth there with many of these people, some of us in the business of predicting, others are not. And anyone can come. This is the point we always make. You can always predict an election based upon whatever. We call our model the Ouija board model. You can flip a coin, the monster for heads and tails for Trump, or whatever you want to do. It doesn't really matter. But it goes beyond just, quote-unquote, winning or presenting an argument. You have to present something that's factual. Professor Reed out of Oakland, California, let's see if we can, and we'll post this article here. We'll have more on this. We have a special presentation on the March Against Hate in Boston on a Saturday. That 20+ thousand people marched against 25 were at the Central Park, known as the Boston Common, and they were there. They cut their rally short, knowing that the followers of O.J. Simpson were coming out of Roxbury. And when they did arrive there, these characters were thrown in some police vans and slowly taken off of the common, the park area there around Boston, etc., and they were literally dropped off in Chinatown. So that was them, the 25. I don't know what happened to them, and then they probably just caught a T-bus or whatever, and out they went. But this whole thing, just looking at, this is from the Atlantic in June of 2007, June the 4th to be precise, the myth of the kindly General Lee. Now, there's a lot of things to this. We won't go into much of it, but a strange part of the continual personality cult of Lee, and this was at the issue in Charlottesville, and caused the murder of Hebehiah. We incidentally did a special on Hebehiah. We invite you to look at it, to listen to it, on many of these same outlets. Is now a few qualities his admirers have professed to see in him or actually possess. Memorial Day has been a tendency to conjure up old arguments about the Civil War. That is understandable. It was created to mourn the dead of a war in which the Union was nearly destroyed. When a half-century rose up in half the country, rose up in rebellion in defense of slavery. This year, the removal of Lee's statue in New Orleans. They're talking about that, but we'll move forward to Charlottesville. Was not to mention the protests on his behalf by the white supremacists. The myth of Lee, it goes something like this. He was a brilliant strategist, a devoted Christian, and he hard slavery, and labored tirelessly after the war to bring the country back together. There's little truth in this. Lee was a devoted Christian, of some type. We won't argue there. Historians regard him as an accomplished tactician. No doubt about that. He could have been in the Union Army. But despite his ability to win individual battles, his decision to fight a controversial war against a more densely populated and industrialized North is considered by many historians to have been a fatal strategic error. Well, it's basically all he could do. And but even if one conjures up Lee's military prowess, he would still be responsible for the death of hundreds of thousands of Americans in defense of the South's authority to own millions of human beings as property because they were black. Lee's elevation is part of a 150-year-old propaganda war designed to erase slavery as a cause of the war and whitewash the Confederates' cause as a noble one. That ideology is called the lost cause, and we always fall back upon Professor David Bright. It provides a foundation on which the South built the Jim Crow system, no doubt about that. They were unwittingly victims of this campaign, those who lack knowledge to separate history from sentiment. They are those who reverence for Lee relies on replacing the actual Lee with a mythical figure who never truly existed. In the Richmond Times-Dispatch, David Cox wrote for white supremacist protesters to invoke his name violates Lee's most fundamental conviction. In the conservative publication Town Hall, Jack Kerwick concluded that Lee was amongst the finest human beings that ever walked the earth. Oh boy. Essay in the Federalist opposes the reversal of Lee's the removal of Lee's statue on the grounds that Lee arguably did more than anyone to unite the country, which he did not. This too is divorced from Lee's actual life. White supremacy does not violate Lee's most fundamental conviction. White supremacy was one of his fundamental convictions. Lee was a slave owner. He was cruel to his slaves, no doubt about that. And they always quote this in a letter. He describes slavery as a moral and political evil. But he goes on to explain, this is where we'll end it up here. I think it, however, is a greater evil to the white man than to the black race. And while my feelings are strongly enlisted in behalf of the latter, my sympathies are more strong for the former. Blacks are immensely better off here, we've heard this argument, than in Africa, morally, socially, and physically. The painful discipline they are undergoing, is necessary for their instruction as a race, and I hope they will prepare and be led and lead them to better things. How long their subrogation may be necessary is unknown and ordered by the wise, merciful province. Their emancipation will soon result from the mild and melting of influence of Christianity than of the storm and trepidance of theory controversy. Well, this theory thing is something that Trump talked about. The argument is still that slavery is bad for white people, good for black people, and most importantly, it's better than abolitionism. Emancipation must wait for divine intervention. Well, this is just crazy, but we won't go in. We'll just append this article here. And while we're on this format, Dr. Edwards, Harry Edwards, the NFL will have a problem if COPE is not assigned, and he is speaking here. Harry Edwards, he's 74 years old. He organized the Olympic Project for Human Rights initiative in 1967, which not only changed the politics of sports, but the politics of society, led to the famous Black Power protest by Tommy Smith and John Carlos in the 1968 Olympics. Throughout his career as an educator and as an author, Revolt of the Black Athlete, a must-read. I read that. In fact, listened to a lecture by many years ago by Professor Edwards himself. Discussed a variety of topics, including his visit with Michael Robinson and Ricky Hampton. He saved some of the most powerful comments for Kaepernick, who is clearly being whiteballed by NFL owners for his anthem protests last season. The NFL needs to sign him. I think it's simple as that. Dr. Edwards said, I don't care about his argument on whether or not it's collusion or reactionary political culture. It simply doesn't matter because the outcomes are all the same. If Kaepernick is not signed at the beginning of the regular season, it's not Kaepernick that is going to have a problem. It's the National Football League that's going to have a problem. The National Football League has brought in people who have been associated with double murders. They have brought back people who are associated with dogfighting. He's talking about Mr. Vick, a critic of Mr. Kaepernick, and murdering anyway. Mutts, they have brought in people who have been associated with rape and drafted a guy in the past draft that hit a woman so hard in Oklahoma that he could have killed her. They brought back people who have been found guilty of vehicular manslaughter while driving on the influence, and brought back people who have been beaten on women, domestic violence, not once but 2 or 3 times. They brought back people who have been charged with rape 2 or 3 times. He's talking about the Philadelphia quarterback here. It wasn't charged, but he was almost charged. Anyway, who takes a knee and says 147 black men and women, children, and shot by police on the average every year since 1968. An overwhelming majority of them unarmed, and better than that as a people. We are better than that as a people and as a society. So we thought we would bring that little piece up as we look at these. Let me just check our time here, and we'll get into sports. We got the Lee part of the dynamic taken care of. And let's look. Okay, we're all right. We don't have a talk show summary tonight. We usually do, but we don't this time around have it. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. Let's go. Let's go to the Pacific Northwest. And we're holding on here a minute. All right, we'll continue with the eclipse story. This is out of Seattle, the PI, the Post Intelligentsia. Anyway, nonetheless, The story goes, you probably heard about it, the solar eclipse in 99 years, visible across the U.S. Later today, and in Seattle. As depending on where you are, it won't be total, meaning the sun will only be mostly covered by the moon. Just how much will be blocked will vary. 88% of the sun will be covered by noon near the Canadian border. Well, let's see, 99% will be covered in Vancouver, Washington. Now, some other times here, Seattle will see about 93% coverage during the eclipse, which is expected to start on the west coast around 9:09 a.m. 9 bells, as we used to say. Anyway, on Monday morning, it will reach its maximum coverage at 10:21. When most of the sun will be covered. The eclipse will end at 11:39, that is Pacific time. Through Seattle, notoriously like to taunt, the clouds are for astrological events. The latest total eclipse viewability from the city in 1979. I lived in Seattle in 1979. Was on a cloudy day, so with 99% of the sun covered, it was just like a dark day. The forecast for Monday shows a sun with a high of 77, unheard of when I was around there, meaning the partial eclipse should be easily viewable. Now, some other things going on here. There will be some confusion about what qualifies as an eclipse glasses. Now, we're finally getting there's plenty of phony selling like hotcakes. In the meantime, the Star Library Network has built an interactive map to find participating stores and libraries, providing legitimate eclipse glasses, sunglasses, smoke glasses, many of them other filters won't cut it. I made a mistake in this. I said, well, get some sunglasses. Anyway, of course, you'll find always do it the old-fashioned way. Simply make this. We talked about that. Taking a piece of paper, the heavier the better, poke a little hole in it, and you can use the paper to project the image of the eclipse onto a ground or wall. If you're busy, the eclipse makes your calendar on the 28th, on the 8th of April 2024, the next time a total eclipse will make it its way. We talked about that earlier. If you are moving from Texas up to Ohio, by the time you make it there, everyone will finally have made it back for this year's eclipse in Oregon. So that's pretty much the story there. Let's just go to this site quickly here, and we'll put a link up here. This is libraries hosting eclipse events, and there's a bunch of them. This is starnet.com, and let me get into this. It's an active clearinghouse. See if your local library has run out of glasses. Please check here, and depending on where you are, we've distributed over 2 million free eclipse glasses and 4,000 education kits to 7,000 libraries. To find a library in your area, we'll look here. We'll have to load this again. But anyway, we'll put the link up here. I don't know where you are to see if you can find a library here that has any glasses. Well, we're having some problems getting it straight. But anyway, we'll put the starnet.com here. So we'll put it up, and you can some reputable vendors here. We'll see if we can maybe shout a couple of those out that actually have glasses out here. American Paper Optics, APM telescopes. Daystar, I guess they make solar glasses. A bunch of others here. Rainbow Symphony, and I guess they make shades. So there's a bunch of those there. We'll put this link up so you'll be able to see it. Also out of the Pacific Northwest, D.B. Cooper stories emerge again. You can't forget Mr. D.B. Cooper. He's a man in 1971 jumped out of a Northwest Orient. That's what they were called at that time. Now that would be a Delta. With his parachute, he jumped out, and he got $200,000. Not sure what that would be today. It was in 1971. The FBI has closed the case. He bought a one-way ticket, as Dan Cooper. They made a mistake on the wire, story, and got it into D.B. Cooper. From Portland, Oregon to Seattle. Once aboard the Boeing 727, he gave the flight attendant a note saying he had a bomb. He wanted $200,000 and 4 parachutes. And the plane was refueled, and he evidently going towards Mexico. He jumped out somewhere over southwest Washington State from the rear door. Never been seen since. The evidence was a small cache of $20 bills near the Columbia River. That was in 1980. And basically that is the only thing they know about him. Is a documentary made for the the History Channel. And I've always been critical of these documentaries, many of them out there. In fact, HBO and Vice, VICE, made a documentary of the white supremacists in Charlottesville, Virginia, and put a character on there, but later became a weeping type. So there's plenty of stories here. The synopsis of the story. This is a Russ, told by one Russ Cooper, by a pilot named Wally. Anyway, this is fictional here. What you get of the story, there's a suspect that they had out there, lived down in San Diego. That never came to fruition. I was going to have that in here, and I guess the new evidence. The new evidence is found is a piece of foam here, and we'll put that up. Foam backpack panel, like the one they showed in the photo. Well, who knows if it was or was not part of it. But this has been playing in cinemas, all sorts of things. This is found in a 200-acre tree farm. Is where they found this information. And this is Robert Rackstraw. I tried 3 times. Is a 73-year-old Vietnam veteran living in San Diego. That is who some believe was the real D.B. Cooper. Rackstraw was a suspect for the hijacking in the late 70s, but formal charges were never pursued. And basically the FBI closed its case here. So is this fiction or not? Mr. Rackshaw denied that he is that person, and several of the witnesses, including a flight attendant, etc., says he was not the man on the plane. So a lot of this is the facts and the fiction. They're all coming at once. The Washington Post wrote a story on this fellow, Rackshaw. And this is what I've had up here. And this is a TV type thing. And just remember, this is on the History Channel. It was on June 10th and June 11th. 2-part documentary by this guy, Colbert, a Los Angeles-based TV and film producer. Tried to persuade Rackshaw to work with him. Rackshaw was having none of that. So basically, the whole situation there is D.B. Cooper supposedly took a back seat, ordered a bourbon and a 7-Up as the plane took off. The note, we already talked about that. The FBI has never ruled out the hijacker could have been killed upon landing. Interviewed hundreds of people. It never found a body or parachute. The only Lead came in 1980 when a family happened upon $5,800 in cash on the Columbia River, whose serial numbers matched the money given to D.B. Cooper. His identity remains a mystery. Law enforcement looked at more than 1,000 suspects, and they don't deny not that Rackshaw was one of those. But anyway, Mr. Rackshaw is still around, I guess, having the last laugh. Rackshaw is a former helicopter pilot, awarded a Silver Star for valid. His attorney said he couldn't confirm these details. Anyway, Rackshaw was convicted. This had a little bit of a criminal record. Evidently, they didn't find any fingerprints there. So Mr. Rackshaw is still wondering about. I know Rackshaw is not a D.B. Cooper, and it pissed me off. Anyway, this is a friend of his said that. So it's a kind of a story that keeps going on. The Last Master Outlaw, that's was Cobert's thing on the History Channel. But Rackshaw just says he's a veteran that's disabled, and he had been homeless. I don't know if he's homeless now or not, but nonetheless, this is the story where D.B. Cooper left off. This is in July 27th of last year. So much for D.B. Cooper. Let's do the sports. We'll do something we got anyway. Okay, so here. Okay, we took a commercial break. The scores. The LA Dodgers were in the Motor City Tigers 6-1 in that contest. This is on Sunday. The Marlins were in New York. Marlins 6-4 over the Mets. The Mariners were in Florida and were shut out by the Rays 3-zip. The Yankees were in Fenway Park. Sox 5-1. The Angels were in Camden Yard in Baltimore. Angels 5-4 over the Orioles. The Reds were in Atlanta. Atlanta 8-1. The D-backs were in the Twin Cities, in which they would have stayed out in the desert. Twins 7-5 in that contest. The Athletics and Astros in Houston. Athletics 3-2. They had 10 hits, no errors, and Houston 7 hits and 2 errors. Don't win games usually like that. Cleveland was in Kansas City. Royals 7-4. And in 10, a slugfest. Toronto came to Wrigley Field. Cubs 6-5 in the contest. The Blue Jays had 8 hits, no errors, and the Cubbies had 8 hits and 1 error. Still won the game. Mr. Wilson was the winner. The White Sox in Texas. Sox 3-2 over the Rangers. The Brewers in Denver. 8-4 over the Rockies. Milwaukee. The Phillies out in San Francisco, game we tuned into. The Phillies were always ahead, 5-2 in that contest over the hapless Giants. The Nationals were in San Diego. 4-1 over the Padres, and the Cardinals and Pirates in Pittsburgh. Pirates 6-1. So now we'll look at the standings here. The standings in Major League Baseball as of the 21st of August. The Red Sox in the American League East are on top. The Yankees are 5 games behind. In the American League Central, Cleveland is on top. The Twins are 5 games back. The Royals are 6.5 games back. In the American League West, Houston is on top. The LA Angels, as now they're called, are 12 games back. In the National League East, the Nationals are on top. The Florida Marlins are 14 games back. In the Central, the Cubbies are on top. The Brewers are 2 games back. This is a real race here. And the Cardinals are 3.5 games back. The Pirates are 6.5 games back. Out west in the National League, the Dodgers are on top, and the race here is for some sort of wild card or whatever. The Colorado Rockies are 20 games back, and the D-backs 21 back. So they are, as they say, close. Let's look at the NFL. We have, incidentally, this week coming up here, the NFL boycott. Mr. Spike Lee will be at NFL headquarters in New York. I think Thursday we gave the scores here. The Ravens beat the Dolphins. This is Jay Cutler's, I guess, debut here, but the Ravens didn't have much of that. The score was 31-7. The Ravens over the hapless Dolphins. The Bills and Eagles in Philadelphia. Eagles 20-16. The Buccaneers and Jaguars, a close game here, 12-8 was the score there. And on Friday, the Vikings and Seahawks out in Seattle, 20-13. The Panthers and Titans, the Titans 34-27. That was on Saturday also. And Kansas City and the Bengals, Kansas City 30-12. The Colts and Cowboys, 24-19 Cowboys. The Pack pulled one out over Washington at 21-17. I guess Carla will be happy there. And the Jets and Lions in the Motor City, Lions 16-6 over the Jets. The Pats and Texans in Houston. 27-23 Texans. The Bears and Cardinals, 24-23 Bears. Bears didn't win something, I guess. The Broncos and 49ers in San Francisco. Mr. Kopenek's old team. Broncos 33-14. And the Rams of Los Angeles win one over the Oakland Raiders, 24-21. And that was on Saturday, so we go to on Sunday. The Falcons and Steelers in Pittsburgh, 17-13. Steelers. The Saints and Chargers out in San Diego, or wait a minute, now in L.A. They moved. 13-7 is the score there. So that's what we get from the NFL exhibition season, and that is where we will end up, as they say. So we have covered quite a bit today. Tomorrow we'll have a reaction, perhaps, to DJ Trump's Afghan policy. We're traveling next week, this week, so I am not sure if we will or we will not do it. We'll have to see on this how it turns out. Nonetheless, we shall talk to you soon. This has been the Monday Morning Quarterback on WBRN Radio and the Boston Red Network on the 21st of October. You'll get the links there where you can find a library that has these eclipse glasses that will be coming your way. Just remember in the morning out there, and incidentally, looking at the Powerball. The Powerball is now up to a whopping $650 million. Over $500 million. I entered that contest, didn't win anything. I guess if we win, you would not see us, but those chances are, I forget what they are. I mean, they are. Well, they didn't say the chance of winning it. Buzz was, let's see, cash prize on 15. Okay. I'm not sure. They always change these things over. I think it's a $2 bet. I don't really look at it that much, but you can evidently magnify. The cash value, incidentally, is $411.7 million. That's the cash value of the Powerball. It's $650 million so far, and I suppose going up. And I don't know. We want to look at what the odds are here. I guess. Well, this old numbers. They always post the odds up, prizes and odds. Well, except in California, where the payouts are partial muted. Anyway, my sales numbers and all that. I guess they have different prizes here. Something like $1 million. The odds are 11 million and so forth and so on. So the odds presented are based on the $2 bet. The odds of winning a prize are 1 in 24.87. So that's where you are. So in other words, millions against you. The grand prize, 1 in how many million it is? Well, anyway, let's just say it's up there. 1 in 43 to 10x. I suppose they must have the 2x 2 times 1 in 1.7, and these are various multipliers here, etc. We won't deal with the Powerball anymore. Nonetheless, have a good week, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.